Hi, my name is Clay Cutts. I'm the founder of Empowerable Behavioral Health and a therapist. I help men and women who are struggling with addictive diseases to get clean and sober, but more than that. What I focus on is helping folks live the best possible life they can possibly live and to become the best possible version of themselves. That's our focus at Empowerable. As you might expect, much of my work is spent with folks who deal with drug issues or alcohol issues. They drink a little too much, or they're using drugs and they try to stop but they can't, and so we help with that. And that's how we spend most of our time. However, there are other types of addictions besides chemical addictions. These are broadly classified as process addictions, and some you may have heard of are things like gambling or food or sex. But another part of that, another type of process addiction that's becoming incredibly more prevalent is technology addictions or internet addictions. That's referred to in different ways, but it's every bit as dangerous as chemical addictions. The big point here is that it's easy to think, well, I use my computer, or maybe I spend a little too much time on Facebook, or maybe I play some games and I spend a whole lot of time, I spend a little bit more time on it than I should, but at least it's not as bad as using drugs or getting high. Well, my argument is that in many ways it is just as bad as using drugs or alcohol or other chemicals to modify how you feel. See, what it comes down to is that people use drugs and or alcohol for one reason: to feel different. We call it mood altering. And very often for folks with those types of issues, when we conquer and we get a handle on the drugs or the alcohol, and we sort of get that under control, this addictive behavior squeezes out somewhere else. And it looks like sex, or it looks like food addiction, or it looks like even exercise addiction. I have patients who get sober and then spend hours and hours exercising, which in and of itself isn't bad, but it can be pathological if it's overdone. So the question is, why do I think internet addiction or technology addictions are in the same league with chemical addictions? And that's what I want to talk about here for just a second. So we've talked about addiction as a brain disease, and we've talked about the disease model of addiction. Some people argue and say, no, it's not a disease, and it's not, it's a more of a moral, behavioral sort of issue. I'm not going to have that debate, but suffice it to say the evidence for a disease is huge. Specifically, we know where in the brain addiction lives in the mesolimbic system of the brain. And so what happens is when we become addicted to something, to some behavior or some substance, our brain chemistry changes. And so this isn't 100% accurate the way I'm going to describe this. Just for simplicity, I'm going to talk about one particular neurotransmitter, dopamine. There's others involved, but I'll talk about dopamine specifically just because it's easier to just talk about this one chemical. Dopamine is the chemical that's responsible for feeling good. So the way I explain this is, if you imagine you're out on a hot day here in Atlanta. It gets really, really hot, and so we go out and work in the yard and sweat, and it's gets pretty uncomfortable. So we come inside and we pour a big glass of iced tea or lemonade and take a drink, and that feeling of we get when that cold liquid hits our hot body. That's a dopamine release. The same is true if you've been gone to work all day, and your pet or your child or your spouse comes up and gives you a hug and, welcome home, honey. I hope you had a good day. And that warm, fuzzy feeling you get from that contact, that's a dopamine release. And so and sort of our bodies are designed to use dopamine to reinforce certain behaviors. We wouldn't ever have sex, for example, if it didn't feel good, and that's a dopamine response, the orgasm. We wouldn't eat, we wouldn't drink if it didn't have some satisfying consequence. So dopamine in itself and the other neurotransmitters aren't bad. Here's the deal, though. When we start using drugs, or we start modifying how our brain works with chemicals or with other processes or other behaviors, the dopamine release is much, much higher than our brain is designed to have. And so what happens is we alter over time, alter the chemistry of our brain. So here's the deal. If I smoke a cigarette, or if I smoke a joint, or I drink a beer, or use cocaine or some drug like that, my dopamine levels, the release of dopamine is off the chart. So that's a mood altering state. Well, the same is true of, say, playing an online game for hours and hours and hours and hours. The reason that people can get addicted to those types of games, and I use that term addicted exactly in the same way that I use it when I talk about someone who's a methamphetamine addict. The game player gets addicted to the point where they don't go to, their schoolwork or their work is impacted, their family life is impacted, their hygiene, maybe their physical health. We hear all kinds of back problems and wrist problems and neck problems from people that are on the computer so much that they don't even move out of the chair. And the reason that happens is that dopamine release is going on when people are playing. And listen, this is no accident. It's no accident that these games are so immersive, as they call them. The designers want people to play and be involved and more involved and more involved. That's how they're designed. So it's no surprise. So the relationship between a chemical addiction and a process addiction is that the external behavior is different. I'm either drinking, or I'm playing a game, or I'm on Facebook too much. Those things are quite different. However, inside your brain doesn't know any difference. All your brain knows is, ooh, there's a big dopamine release, and that really feels good. So guess what? Let's do it again and again and again. And after time, that chemistry gets changed in your brain so that you sort of cross that invisible line from just user or person who takes advantage of the game, all the way to someone who's addicted. That means we have withdrawal when we cease. So that's a sort of a summary of why I think technology addictions, internet addictions, online gaming addictions, those sorts of things are every bit as related to addiction as beer or cocaine or methamphetamine. The chemistry is almost exactly the same. So if you're having trouble with alcohol or drugs, or you're having some trouble with technology, or with online gaming, or internet addiction, or food or pornography or anything like that, I know it's hard, but I would encourage you to raise your hand and say, hey, I need some help. There are lots of folks out there that will be happy to help you any way they can. So good luck, and thanks for tuning in.